Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's get into our last shiur of volume number 20, the last shiur regarding Muktzeh. We spoke about many types of Muktzehs, Muktzeh machbas gufa, Muktzeh machbas chesron, kiss, basas ladavar ha'aser, and now the final shiur that we're going to talk about is ways to move Muktzeh. What do you mean? You can't use Muktzeh. That's the din d'Rabbanan of not moving Muktzeh. But we will see sometimes, it's a difficulty, and something Muktzeh is left in a place where you kind of need to move it. Again, a klisha malachta le'isser, as we said, a pen, a stapler, a crayon, a scissors, all of those can be moved. L'tzorach gufa, l'tzorach makomo, because that's a different category of muktzah or not even muktzah. But what about if you have a real muktzah, and you want to move it, but you can't move it? So what do you do? So this starts on page 321 in volume number 20. Again, the Niyaza family volume, and we have to talk about permitted ways to move muktzeh. So moving it directly is a problem, right? You can't. That's the Issa D'Rabbanan of moving muktzeh. So first of all, there are 3 points really to this year: touching versus moving, and then 2 ways of unusual type of moving. So first of all, touching muktzeh. The pashtus is that there is no isser of touching muktzeh, moving muktzeh. But if I might have put a finger on a car, so there's no problem with that, right? The Mordechai says this. The Mordechai Meseches Beitza, Remez Tashreish Memhei. If you go to page 321, source 26. Remember the Mordechai, if you look in the back, the Mordechai was printed as one sefer, and that was printed at the back of every Gemara, but really it starts with Aleph Beis Gimel, the beginning of the Seder, and every Masechta continues from the previous Masechta. That's why you have in Beitza, which is a very short Masechta, Siman Tafrei Remez Tafreish Memhei, right, 545, because it's in Moed, Shabbos, Erevim, Sachem, Shkalim, Yumasukah Beitza, beforehand. The Mordechai says, Kazer Rabbeinu Meir, the Mordechai quotes the Maharami Rutenberg. Kazer Rabbeinu Meir, Dim Chayfetz O Shum Davar Munach Alamos. If you have something that's on money, Al Shar Muktzeh, B'Shabbos, you have something that's on a Muktzeh item, and the item is not here you have the mutter item is on top. Right, if the mutter item is on the bottom, then you have an issue of buses. Whether it became buses, that was the last year. But if it's on top, v'utzarach lo'usu achefetz, right? I have some non-muktzah item on top of muktzah item. I can take off the non-muktzah item. Mutter lilo misham ki davar hamuktzah eino aser rak letaltel mimakom lemakom, because davar muktzah is only aser to move from place to place. Avoliga bo mutter, but to touch it is mutter, and that's what we pass in the Shulchan Aruch. There is no iser of touching muktzah. Davar shehu muktzah mutter liga bo. As long as you don't move it, you can't even move it a drop. Let's say I want to most assume that you could lean on muktzah. I don't want to tie your shoe on a car. On a tree, that's a separate Isser D'Rabbanan, not Muktzeh, of Hishtamshus Be'ilan that we spoke about. Hishtamshus Bebehema and Hishtamshus Be'ilan, that is worse, right? It's better to tie your shoe on the car. But if I lean on the car so much that I move it, so then that could be a problem. Unless you say, which is interesting to think about, a car, what kind of muktzah is a car? Is it muktzah machbas isser? Is it a klisha malachta isser? If it's like a pen, it's a car, but it's a pen. Klisha malachta isser, right? I was once speaking to someone, they said, in the days of old, right now it's usser, but in the days of old, when the lights didn't go on, every time you opened or closed the door or moved something in the car, let's say in the olden days, I remember growing up, you open the trunk, there's no lights that go on, it's all manual, it's not electric. So let's say you don't have enough room in your refrigerator to keep all the drinks for Shabbos. You want to keep it cold, and it's freezing outside, so you can put it in the trunk. But the problem is, you can put it in the trunk, so you can open the trunk, because there's a klisha malachto le'isser, l'tzorech gufo. You want to open it to get the drinks. The problem is closing it. Closing the trunk afterwards. You probably can't close the trunk. Why? Again, we're not saying this is a good idea, especially nowadays with the lights that go on, but in the days of old, when there was nothing, but closing it is, why are you closing the trunk? You don't need the space anymore, unless you had to put something on the back of the car. You don't need legufo. It's just basically for the protection of the car. That's what we call mechama letzel, and then that would be usher. We paskin mechama letzel. But either way, moving muktzeh is the issue. Moving muktzeh is the issue. Davar shu muktzeh muter ligabo, as the Shulchan Aruch says, you're allowed to touch it as long as you don't move it. The Ramah also says in Orach Chaim Siman Shin Ches, remember that's the siman about muktzeh, source 28. Call muktzeh eno aser elo bitil tulo. Muktzeh is only aser to move. Aval b'negia ba'alma, but just touching she'eno midnadnedo shari. I don't move it. V'lachein muter lika b'menorah shebeis hakneses. Shaneres dolkos alav. You're allowed to touch a lamp in the shul. O betaner shedolik bo'esh, or an oven that has a fire. V'chein muter lika davar heter hamunach al gabi muktzeh. Right, that is muter. Fine. What's the controversy? There's a Yerushalmi. There's Yerushalmi in a few places. One of them is in Beitzah, there that the Mordechai is commenting on. So the beginning of the 5th parak of Beitzah, the Yerushalmi says, sounds like you can't even move muktzeh. Right? The Gemara there said, the Yerushalmi, Beitzah, Shanol Yantiv, if you have an egg that's muktzeh, it's nolad. We didn't discuss every type of muktzeh. Nolad is one of those that we didn't discuss, but this is, it's over here. If I have an egg that was laid on Yantiv, which is muktzeh, it's nolad, it was created on Yantiv, I could put a kli next to it so it doesn't roll. Next to it. But Shmuel Amar Kovan Lav Kli, Rabbi Shmuel says you can even cover it with a kli, let's say a bowl to protect it. Rabbi Mana, as long as it's not touching the egg. You could cover it, but as long as it's not touching the egg. The question is, what do you mean? What's wrong with touching? I thought touching is allowed. Major machlokes. What's the pshat of the Yerushalmi? Machlokes between the Maggid Mishnah and the Trumas Hadeshen. I would say most against the Trumas Hadeshen. Says the Maggid Mishnah, you're talking about an egg. If you pull the bowl on top of an egg and it's touching it, the egg's for sure going to move. The egg is not something stable. You touch an egg, it moves. Says the Maggid Mishnah, that's why the Yerushalmi, it's not per se that it's usher to touch muktzeh, but touching something that's for sure going to move, that's the problem because of moving muktzeh, not because of touching muktzeh. That's what the Maggid Mishnah says in Hilchot Shabbos Chafei Chaf Gimel there in source number 30. Yerushalmi, ubavad shelo yiga kebeitza, bebeitza, v'lo yadati tam. The Yerushalmi said, the Maggid Mishnah says, why? V'chia muktzeh v'hanol and usher liga bahen, kol she'ena menaneya. If you don't move it, it's usher. Havadei lo. The efshar shema yinaneya habeis haidei kli. The issue is with an egg, it's going to move. It's going to move if you touch it. That's the pshat of the Yerushalmi. And the Trumas Hadeshen argues. Rabbi Sol Isserlin says, no. Yerushalmi says touching, it means touching. So what do you mean? You're allowed to touch muktzeh. Oh, you're only allowed to touch muktzeh if it's incidental. If you're touching muktzeh for litzorech, the dvar muktzeh, it's also to even touch muktzeh. That's the Chiddush Gadol of Trumas Hadeshen. 31. Ulefi zed tzorech l'yashiv shaper baha. Right? Kofan al kli. Why are you allowed to be kofa the kli? Only if you don't touch it. Shelo tishaver. V'tzorech lizar shelo yiga hakli bebeitza. You have to make sure that the bowl doesn't touch the egg based on that Yerushalmi. V'yamai asher liga b'muksa afilu b'yadayim. You're allowed to touch muksa even directly, says the Trumas Hadeshen. V'dochek lomar. I don't like what the Maggid Mishnah says. Kivan debates a davar misgalgel hu imhaya kli nogea ba yefshar shayish lo yizem mekoma. I don't like that chilik. I don't think that's the pshat. Doesn't sound that way from the Yerushalmi, says the Trumas Hadeshen. Elanir lachalek dahasam kiva dahanachas akli ala beitza hu letzorach habeitza. You're putting the bowl on the egg for the protection of the egg. For the tzorach davar hamuksa, that's usher even touching. Davi davar hamuksa v'lachin usher ligabo. Machlokes Maggid Mishnah and the Trumas Hadeshen. Why does the Yerushalmi say that you're not allowed to touch the bowl to the egg? Either because you could for sure move the egg. That's what most assume. And the Trumas Hadeshen says, no, even muktzeh is usher to just even touch if it's l'tzarach davar hamuktzeh. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Yerushalmi, but we assume the Mishnah Berurah and others say the pshat of the Maggid Mishnah. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Yud 32, as long as you don't touch it, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'yafal gav demuter lika b'muktzeh kedil el hacha beitza koi kadesh lo yinanei abo. Right, and that's why it is egg is a problem. Anything else that there's a good chance that it won't move, you could do it. You don't have to say, oh, maybe it's going to move. If it's a good chance that it won't move, you could do it. You could cover it. You could touch it. You can touch it. That's what the Chut HaMishani says. Venira, an egg, dafka, because an egg is wobbly. Venira, dahada asur l'ngoa b'muksa kishe misnadneid Dafka kashiyadua, she is not naid, if it's known. Avalim hu ragdavar harogil, she is not naid, mutter lidgala. So that is step number 1 in our shiur. Moving versus touching. We paskin, it's always mutter to touch, even against the Tzurba Hilchot, even l'tzarech davar hamuktzeh, you're allowed to touch it. Next, so what about indirect touching? Direct touching is usher. What about indirects? There are 2 types of indirect touching. What's called in halacha tiltul min hatzad and tiltul begufo. Those are the 2 types. Tiltul min hatzad is where I touch it indirectly with something else. I mean to touch it, but I move it. I touch it, move it indirectly. Let's say I have a barrel and I tilt the barrel so the rock falls off the top. That's called tiltul min hatzad. I'm not picking up the rock, that's direct tiltul, but I'm moving it tiltul min hatzad. If I would knock off the rock with my elbow, that's called tiltul begufo. Tiltul min hatzad is different than tiltul begufo. So there are differences in halacha, as we will see. So first let's talk about tiltul min hatzad, right? Moving something indirectly. So the Gemara seems to have a stira. About tiltul min hatzad, moving something indirectly. Because the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Mem Gimel, source 35, the Gemara there talks about tiltul min hatzad, itmar, the Gemara says, meis hamuta b'chama. If you have a corpse, somebody died on Shabbos, and now you don't want to keep the body in the sun. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda, who was a Talmud of Rav, he's a Namoreh, and then he was a Talmud of Shmuel after Rav died. If it's on a bed, you could take like a stretcher and move the dead body. The dead body's Muktzeh. So you can move it from stretcher to stretcher to stretcher to get it into the shade. Again, that's tiltul min hatzad. You're not touching it directly, you're moving it from one to the other. Rabbi Chanina bar Shlamya b'shmei Rav Amar, maniach alav kikar o tinok o metaltzlo, a different heter which is unique. According to the Bavli, unique to a dead body, you could put something else, something non-muktzeh on top of the dead body, a baby or a cookie, and then move the dead body. Because the ikar is the cookie or the baby. But the Gemara says that's a machlokes, whether you could be tiltul min hatzad, hofcha b'mita lamita, or put kikar otinok. Heicha diika kikar otinok kol yamal pligi deshari. Everybody agrees that you could use that heter of kikar otinok for in this case. Ki pligi delesle. What if you don't have a kikar o tinok? Says the Gemara, ki pligi delesle. Mar savar tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul, mar savar lo shmei tiltul. So the Gemara first thinks that it's a machlokes whether tiltul min hatzad is shmei tiltul or lo shmei tiltul, and the Gemara says, is this a machlokes tanav? And the Gemara answers, no, lo dekuli alma tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul. Really, everybody agrees that tiltul min hatzad is considered touching, and the machlokes is about something else. But what do you see, lekuli alma? Everybody agrees tiltul min hatzad is shmei tiltul. So then that sounds like it's aser, indirect. But as we learned earlier. But the case of the rock on the barrel, and we learned earlier, the case sugya buses, you could tilt the barrel, and then the rock falls off, right? That's mutter. The Mishnah in the 21st parak of Masechah Shabbos. So it's 36. Ha'even sha'al pi hachavis mata al tzida v'hi nofelas. If you have a rock on a barrel, you tilt it, and it falls off. Ha'isem ben Achavio said if you need to, if there's no room, you can pick up the barrel, as long as it's not a buses, move it, and then tilt it. So you see from there, the tiltul min hatzad is mutter. So, in the Gemara, Shabbos Bem Gimel, the case of the dead body, it's mashma, tiltul min hatzad, the stretchers is aser, and yet by the barrel is mutter. So, how do you answer that question? So, Tosfos says, Tosfos there, in Daf Mem Daled and Aleph, Tosfos says, it depends if you're moving it, l'tzarech dvar muktzeh or not. That's the question. In the case of the barrel, you want to get to the wine inside. So why are you doing this tiltul min hatzad? To get to the wine for the dvar mutter. That's why it's mutter. The dead body, you're moving it for the dead body. So tiltul min hatzad is aser if it's l'tzarech dvar hamuktzeh. That's Tosfos' chilek. So yeah, we had a chilek like the Tzurba Hilchot had earlier. We don't pass it like the Tzurba Hilchot. But as we'll see, we do pass it like this Tosfos. V'yomeri, the yesh l'chalik, t'hacha ikra tiltul l'tzarech meis. In the case of Shabbos Mem Gimel, where you're moving the stretcher from the dead body from stretcher to stretcher, from bed to bed, that's a problem. Because there you're doing tiltul min hatzad, indirect movement, l'tzorach dvar muktzeh. V'lo dami l'kol hanu she'ose ikra tiltul l'tzorach karva chavis. But in the case of the barrel, you're doing it because you want to get the wine. And therefore, that's why it's v'lo l'tzorach hamaos v'ha even. So that's the chiluk in between tiltum and atzal l'tzorach davar mutter l'tzorach davar ha'aser. Why would there be a difference? You're moving something. You're doing something. You're moving muktzeh. So if it's considered moving muktzeh, it should be aser. If it's not considered muktzeh, it should be mutter. Why should there be a difference? So Rav Shlomo Zalman explains that there's a kula. Because remember the Ravid we discussed. Remember the 4 reasons for Muktzeh, 3 from the Rambam, 1 from the Ravid. The Ravid connected Tiltul and Muktzeh to Hotza'ah. Hotza'ah, carrying something out. So if you're not actually carrying it, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, in the Mincha Shlomo, source 38, the time of the Milsa, you can be Mekel Nireh. To keep it the Isra Muktzeh Hu Gzeira Atu Hotza'ah, since it's all connected to Hotza'ah, Lachein, Kol Shemetaltel Begufo, Ukala Achar Yad, even if you would actually carry it out like this in an unusual way, you'd be patur. If you do anything unusual, so too here. The muktzah is gzeira atu hotzah. So if hotzah is not going to be chayev if it's done in an unusual way, so too moving this rock or moving this dead body in an unusual way, we're not going to aser. And this is what we paskin. Shulchan Aruch passes like that. Tosfos Shulchan Aruch says in source 39, Tiltum and Atzad l'tzorach davar hamutter is mutter. Right, Tiltum and Atzad only l'tzorach davar hamutter is going to be mutter. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch on in Shin Tes now. That's the case of the chavis. The case of the chavis is shachach even al pi chavis omol salakar mata chavis al tzitava even nofelas. Right, the rock falls off. Umanar akarva. Most often, if you have a pillow, let's say you have a pillow, or you've forgotten a muktzeh item on your pillow. So what are you going to do? You pick up the pillow, you move the item, and you slide it off somewhere else. It comes up all the time. You leave a muktzeh item on your bed. So that's tiltum and atzad l'tzarech davar hamutter. You want the pillow. So that's mutter. That's mutter. And if it's between the barrels, you're allowed to pick it up, as we said. And the Mishnah Berurah says, as we explained, that it is mutter. The Mishnah Berurah says, but if it's for litzorach davar hamuktzeh somehow, you have whatever's on your bed, and you want to put it somewhere safe, you're not going to use the bed, but you just want to put the muktzeh somewhere safe to be able to, you want to lock it up in a closet, so that will be a problem. Because tiltum and atzal l'tzorach davar hamuktzeh is a problem, like the case of the dead body. Avalam einot tzarach lem klal, says the Mishnah Berurah in 41. Rak shechoshesh mishum seidas hamuktzeh gufa shelo yigneveim afilu nir aser. That's going to be aser. That's what the Maggid Avram he quotes from Rabbeinu Yerucham the chulu. Good. The Shulchan Aruch also says by the barrel case, he adds in 42, not only if you want the wine, what if you want the spot where the muktzeh is? That's also considered dvar that allowed. If it's l'tzarach davar hamutter or l'tzarach hamakom that you need, you're also allowed to do tiltum and atzad. You have something on the bed, you have something on the table. That's the Shulchan Aruch. Hadash lo shorei lahatos ulenair dafka b'shetzorach leguf hachavis vakar. Aval l'metzorach l'makom hachavis yochol tatzleim. They can move the whole thing. So tiltum and atzal l'tzorach davar hamutter or l'tzorach hamakom. That is all allowed. The Shulchan Aruch says, let's say you have you finished eating and you have some shells or peels on the table. So how about lifting up the tablecloth or a board in order to clear it? That's also a form of tiltum and hatzad. Again, you're not picking anything up directly, and that's litzarach what? Litzarach, you want to throw it out because you want to clear the table. You want the table to be clean. So that's also litzarach davar hamutter. Shaking out the tablecloth outside, right, from the crumbs. The crumbs you might see are edible, not even muktzeh. But even if there are shells and peels, that's the Shulchan Aruch 44. Atzamos on page 328. Atzamos sheru'im l'klavim v'klifim sheru'im l'machal behema. If you have bones that are ra'ui for a kelev, and it's not muktzeh then, or a peel sheru'im l'machal behema, upirurim she'emen kazayis mutar lavir mal hashulchan. Those you can pick up directly. That's not muktzeh. If it's edible, even for animals. Avalam ein haklifim ru'im l'machal behema. But if they're not roy for animal fodder, osir l'tal talem, you can't directly pick them up. Ella, we have the heter of graf shalrei, like we had that in the past. So there could be some heter, but lachatchila, if you don't have to do that, minaretz atavla veim noflim, right? You could shake out the tablecloth, shake out the barrel, the board, veim noflim, when they fall. V'mayet tzarech l'makom hashulchan. If you need the makom, as we just said, afilu ein alei al dvarim she'enim ru'im l'machal behema mutar lagbia. right? You need the table. That's the heter of Graf Shalrei, as we said in the past. But if you could pick it up the tablecloth and take it off that way, that might be that would be okay. What about, is it called tiltum and atzad? Well, all the things like, it's not usually, you don't move them. You pick up the barrel, you pick up the stretcher. What about using a knife to like push the crumbs? Is that tiltum and atzad? Would that be okay? So that's a machlokas achronim. We assume lakula, like the Taz. The Taz says in 46, the Turei Zahav, that even a knife or a fork, that's considered tiltum and atzad, right? It's a kula here, and it's a kula also, I would say, in most of Hilchos Borer. We assume a fork is not a streparating instrument. It's like an extension of your hand. So what about here? Here, it's lakula. It's not called an extension of your hand. According to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, skip for a minute to 47. No. This is not tiltum and atzad. A barrel moving a rock is tiltum and atzad. That's not normal. But a fork or a knife, that's an extension of your hand. Like in Hilchos Borer, the Shulchan Aruch Harav says in 47, Kishemarin besakin, ena metalta me'aleim elu metalta ade sakin, shenasa lo kiyad arucha. But the Taz in the previous source says, no. This is tiltum and atzad. You're not touching the muktzeh directly. Says the Taz, nira dehu adin imma avira ma yedei davar acher kegon shu magaro osama de sakin min amapa mutter. But if you move it with a knife, kiva delonoga bahem, you didn't touch it. Muktzeh is about touching it directly. This is tiltum and atzad. This is accepted by the Mishnah Brura as well. The Tan, the end of the previous Mishnah Brura, he paskins like the Taz. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav is machmir, but Meikar Adin, it seems like most paskin like the Taz. The Chazon Ish answers for a different reason. The Chazon Ish says that indirect touching is when it's not clear, what we said. This is only the tzorach davar hamuter, right? That's what we said. But not tzorach davar aser. Tiltum and atzad is muter l'tzorach davar hamuter, not muter l'tzorach davar hamuksa. But the Chazon Ish says even if it's l'tzorach davar hamuter, if it's clear that you're moving for the dvar muksa, like the knife case, you're clear. What are you doing? Crumbs. So he's not comfortable with that. He's not comfortable with that. The Chazon Ish says in Orach Chaim and Simon Memches, he quotes this Taz that says it's considered tiltum and atzad, and then he quotes Yesh Cholkim like the Shulchan Aruch Harav. The Zelo Mikri tiltum and atzad, L'tzarach davar hamuter, and he says why? Delo amr ela b'shachach even b'kli demetatla kliya ima even. I'm moving the barrel, and it's like I'm getting the wine out. That's what I would call this act. But what am I doing here? The shama tiltul lakli. The tiltul is the barrel. You're not moving the rock. The tiltul is the barrel. What about here? You're not moving the knife. You're moving the crumbs. You would call this moving the crumbs. Even if it's l'tzorach davar hamuter, l'tzorach makomo, like we said, this is going to be aser, says the Chazon Ish. But many, he quotes here the Yalkut Yosef and the Shmir Shabbos rule like the Taz, it's muter meikar adin. Ad kan, discussion number 2 out of 3 for today's shiur. So we discussed moving versus touching. And we said there's a Trumas Hadeshen that's machalek that tiltum, that moving is always aser, but even touching l'tzorach davar hamuktzeh is a problem. We don't pass in that way. We pass in touching even l'tzorach davar hamuktzeh is going to be mutter. Fine. Then part 2. Then we have tiltum and atzad, indirect touching. Also, Tosfos holds that the chiluk between the Gemaras are l'tzorach davar hamuktzeh is aser, l'tzorach davar hamuter is mutter, and that we do pass on like that chiluk. Right? If it's l'tzorach davar hamuktzeh, we say that one cannot do tiltum and atzad. Fine. And then finally, number 3 is tiltul begufo. What about with my elbow? What about with my shoe? What about kicking something? So what is that? So again, we will see that there are those that say the same chiluk here, but we will see that it might not be the case. Not the case. It starts with a Mishnah. The Mishnah in the 20th parak of Shabbos says, Hakash al gavi amita. In the olden days, they didn't have mattresses. So like we have, so you have a bunch of straw on the bed. So straw is muktzeh, right? If you don't unless you designated it before Shabbos, but straw can be muktzeh. So Akasha al gabe mita, says the Mishnah, source number 50, Lo yinanenu biyado, ela b'nanenu b'gufo. You're not allowed to move it with your hands, but just with your body. You can move it with your body. So what does that mean, moving the straw with one's body? Machlokes, Rishonim, Rosh, and the Ran. Rosh and the Ran. What exactly does this mean? The Rosh says that I'm allowed to move this straw even l'tzorech davar hamuksa, meaning we're more makel by tiltul begufo than tiltul b'natzad. Remember, tiltul b'natzad is I move the barrel, I'm moving something else, and the dvar muksa moves. Tiltul begufo means I'm moving it directly. I'm moving the muksa within an unusual part of my body. That's tiltul begufo. So the Rosh says, that's what this Mishnah says. It says the straw you can move with your body. What's going on there? What does that mean? Says the Rosh. V'lo kasha the hasan af tiltul enkan. Bikash eino metaltel ela begufo. Kila achar yad. It's you're moving it with your body. Hilkach aval gav delakashu muksa hu tzarech. Medamel tiltul b'natzad tzarech davar mutter. It's still allowed. Even if it's l'tzarech, you need the straw for something. So you can move the straw with your elbow somewhere. That is allowed. Says the Ran, no. You know what you're doing here? You're getting into bed. You're getting into bed on the straw, and you're shaping the straw for you. That movement is l'tzarech davar hamutter, just like tiltul b'natzad. Says the Ran, Chaf Mabez Nadafi Arif, 52. V'yahi nami testan hakasha gavi amita lo yirano biyado avamanania begufo hainu time why lefi she'eno metaltel asakash mibnei shetzarech lo el mibnei shetzarech lamita. No, you're lying down in bed. You don't need the straw. V'ef sharlo below tiltul akash. You can't get into the bed of straw without moving the straw. Umisham hachi kivan lo metaltel behedya ela kalachar yad shari. Wow. Major machlokas rishonim between the Rosh and the Ran. So again, the Rosh says it's mutter to move. Tiltul begufo is more makel than tiltul b'natzad. According to the Rosh, tiltul begufo is mutter even l'tzorach davar hamuksa. And the Ran says no. The Ran says tiltul begufo is only mutter l'tzaracha, like we've said before. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins l'kula. We're more makel by tiltul begufo than we are tiltul b'natzad. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rosh, source 53, v'tiltul begufo afilu l'tzorach davar aser mutter. Mutter. And there's no difference, the Mishnah Berurah explains, between which part of the body we're using it with as long as it's not our hands. Tiltul begufo, pirish she'eno nogea biyado ki'im begufo, o b'shar evarav, makalina bayosim mishar tiltul b'natzad. Right, tiltul begufo is mutter, more mutter than tiltul b'natzad, because tiltul begufo is mutter even l'tzarech davar ha'aser. The Chazon Ish is not happy. He argues with the Shulchan Aruch and says no. L'tzorach davar, he thinks that the Ran is right, and therefore l'tzorach davar ha'aser is aser. It should only be l'tzorach davar ha-mutter. And he quotes a Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Chav Zayin that seems to point in this direction, but that's what the Chazon Ish says. Ein heter klal, source 56. Ein heter klal l'taltel muktzeh b'techifas haregel, l'tzorach ha-muktzeh. You can't. If it's so, what happens if you're walking in the street and you kick a rock? So are you allowed to directly kick a rock? So is that tiltul begufo, or that's normal movement of that rock? It's probably a good idea not to. That's l'tzar, unless you're doing it to keep it to kick the rock off of the street so nobody trips on it. So then that's l'tzar makomo. That's l'tzar makomo, and therefore that's like l'tzar davar hamutter. That would be okay. But if you're doing it stam to kick a rock because you want to see if you could hit something, that could be an issue. But again, either way, the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah is what we paskin. The Shmir Shabbos says also in 57, mutter letalta dvar muksa shelo kederach shematalta nosomi mosachol. You can move something in a way that is not the normal way of being metalta. Kagon al yedei neshifa, even by blowing. O dechifa beregel, pushing with your foot. O bemarpek, or with your elbow. V'chein achor yadav, the back of your hand. V'anikra b'shem tiltul begufo. O tiltul kala achar yad. Tiltul zeh mutter afilu k'shemitatul l'tzorach davar muksa atzma. Wow. So tiltul menatzad, like the barrel case, where if you're moving muksa indirectly, so that's mamish, a real regular moving, you're just not moving it directly. That's only mutter l'tzorach davar hamutter. But tiltul begufo is mutter even l'tzarach davar ha'aser. Kagon matbea ushtar chesef shematzam barachov. Right, if there's a coin or money you see on the street, you can push it with your foot. Usually don't push money with your feet. So you can push it with your feet under something, so you can get it after Shabbos. Picking it up is directly muksa, but that you could do. Because that's tiltul begufo even l'tzarach davar ha'aser. The Yaakov Yosef also, and Rav Moshe also says that as well. Rav Moshe says in the last source, 59, Eichesh linhog l'gabi tiltul davar aser ade tiltul begufo. Rav Moshe says you maybe should try to be machmir. Maybe try to be machmir if it's possible. But if not, it's mutter. Im mutter dafka l'tzorach hamutter l'tzorach davar aser. Also tata begufa l'tzorach hamuksa. Achein im hu davar nachutz mutter. If there's a real need for it. Adkan, the issues of Muktzeh. Again, Muktzeh was a very big topic, but this last year was about the general, not about a specific Muktzeh, but about moving versus touching. Tiltum and Atzad, Muktzeh Machwas Gufa. But again, remember all the different types of Muktzahs, of Muktzeh Machwas Chesron and Kiss, the ones that we discussed. Muktzeh Machwas Kiss, Muktzeh Machwas Gufo. Buses. We did not discuss Nola. We did not discuss Mivatal Kli Mehechano, making something Muktzeh. But either way, this is all many issues, and it takes us through volume number 20. Again, think about all the things that we did in this volume. We spoke about personal care on Shabbos, cutting nails and braiding and makeup and soap. And we discussed all about animals on Shabbos, about the animals, malacha, machamer, trapping, tzad, killing animals. We spoke about muktzeh, all these items, very halacha l'maisa cases, here in volume number 20. Have a wonderful day.